I'm going to speak today on the psychology of supernatural and paranormal beliefs. So, just a little bit more about myself. As I mentioned, I have a PhD in behavior and brain sciences from UGA. My focus is social psychology. So, today, a lot of this is going to be coming from a social psychology lens. Of course, religion is not my specific area of expertise. And also, this has nothing to do with what I did at CDC. So my words do not in any way reflect any opinions of the CDC. But I'm going to endeavor to describe the psychology of belief and expertise, or sorry, of belief and uh, paranormal and supernatural phenomena from a social psychological lens. And also, I'm do not have access currently to online library databases that have the paywall, so I may not have like the latest and greatest, but I did a pretty thorough review of what I could get on Google Scholar. So to start off, a couple of just definitions so that you know what we're doing, what our scope is. First of all, when I said supernatural, it looks like in the literature that term is used mainly for religious beliefs. So beliefs in deities, gods, etc. Whereas paranormal is used to describe belief in like ghosts, psychics, fortune telling, astrology, etc. And although these two are studied somewhat separately, and I'll try to indicate where where they kind of have separate results, there isn't a lot of overlap. So a lot of what I'm talking about will apply to both at the same time. And then I'm going to be focusing on actual beliefs. So I'm not going to be looking at when people have mental health issues where they may have delusions or hallucinations. And I'm not really going to be focusing on any individuals perpetuating hoaxes. So if they're pretending to believe in order to deceive somebody, that is not going to be under the scope of today's talk. But with that, I'm going to endeavor. Our big question today is, why do people believe in the supernatural and paranormal? And I'm going to give you about four main reasons that I've found in the literature why this may happen. I'll go ahead with the more, I guess, simplistic one first, and that is that perceptions can be deceiving, right? You can see this picture here. There is a coat rack at the end of the hall, but it looks very much like a person. So that is one example. If you, I'm going to give several other examples. One is that the areas in the brain that govern body awareness and mind awareness tend to be separate. And so, one of the major explanations for dualistic thinking is that this is why it makes the idea of having a soul feel intuitive. Because really, if we, feel in our heads, it feels like our mind is something separate from our body that can endure past our body. So it just kind of feels right. Another example is pareidolia, and I may not be saying that right, but it's the phenomenon where our minds tend to look for and find patterns in random stimuli. Our minds especially like to look for faces. So this is why, ghost hunters may hear static or hear voices in static, or you can see the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich as depicted here. Our brains would rather tend towards seeing something than not seeing something because they don't want to miss something important. And then another example is the ideomotor effect. We can unconsciously produce movements in objects, and it makes it seem like those objects are moving on their own. So think Ouija board, planchettes, pendulums, dowsing rods. The individual is moving the thing, but they don't feel like they're moving the thing. It does not feel like it's under their conscious control, so they think that the thing is moving on their own. And then, of course, there's some pretty common cognitive phenomena. Some of you may have heard of these because they're in popular discourse. We all tend to run on confirmation bias, so we tend to look for evidence to support what we already believe, and then discount evidence that disconfirms it. Right? This is the way that our brain kind of conserves energy, conserves time, and then also is a good way to kind of assert our will onto the world around us. But it tends to mean that if you go around believing something, you're just going to see more and more evidence of it. So you may hear, if you talk to a Christian, they say, well, of course I believe in God. I see evidence of God everywhere. And it's like, yeah, but you don't see all the evidence that God does not exist, that is also everywhere. So confirmation bias plays a role. The self-fulfilling prophecy is another one. Simply, if we believe something, we tend to act in ways that actually brings it about. So if I was told that I'm going to go out tonight and I'm going to meet a tall, dark, handsome man, then I am probably going to go out and I'm probably going to pay attention to and talk to all of the tall, dark, handsome men, which is going to make it more likely that I'm going to snag me a tall, dark, handsome man. This is kind of what people refer to as the law of attraction, but they tend to view it as a mystical, your energy, you're putting out energy and vibes and making things happen. And it's not really that, it's just that our behavior changes in subtle ways. We see opportunities more in the environment, and are more likely to pursue those because we believe the thing. This is also the way that you know, Wiccans and pagans use sympathetic magic, right? They do a ritual and then they're like, well, now that I cast this spell for love or confidence, they now will act in ways that bring that about. And then finally, this is kind of a fun one. We can have superstition conditioned in us. So you may be familiar with the ideas of classical and operant conditioning. Pavlov's dogs, the bell would ring and they would get food. So they started associating the bell with food. Well, this can happen with superstitions. Let's say you win several ball games and wearing a certain shirt, and you start to think that that shirt has something to do with you winning. So that becomes your lucky shirt. They can actually do this in animals. You may see here in this picture, this is a superstitious pigeon. And B.F. Skinner actually conditioned superstition in this pigeon. What he did was like he had the pigeon was just chilling in its box, and he had a random something that would randomly drop a food pellet in at random intervals. Whatever the pigeon happened to be doing when the pellets came, it started to believe was causing the pellets. So it got to where the pigeon was flapping its wings frantically to try to get the pellets to come because it believed that flapping its wings would bring the pellets. And then, of course, when the pellet did come, it thought that it did it, right? It thought that was what had happened is they had caused the pellet. So kind of a funny story if you don't feel sorry for the pigeon. So all of these are good and well, but and a lot of times when you explain to people what is happening in these instances, they'll be like, okay, well, I understand, and they will let go of that belief. But many, many people do not. And the question is why? Why are people resistant to let go of these beliefs? And that is what I'm going to go into for the rest of the talk. The first big reason I'm going to give is that we evolved to believe. This is something that is baked into our evolutionary history, and it is a feature, not a bug. So the first bomb that I have to drop on everyone here is that we are not rational animals at our core. Sorry if this uh, rocks anybody's worldview, but this applies to skeptics and believers alike. Neuroscientists describe the brain as a rider on an elephant, right? So you can give some direction intentionally, but at the end of the day, that elephant is going to go where it wants to go. You can't do much to stop it. The reason this is the way that the brain evolved from the bottom up and from the inside out. You can see here the first thing to evolve over time was the reptilian brain. This is what reptiles have, and that's mostly autopilot. So, eat, sleep, mate, run away, and it just kind of governs those things. The mammalian brain came next, and this might be what maybe your dogs and cats have, where it's very strongly focused on emotion and memory. This area is home to the famous amygdala, right? The part of your brain that senses threat and that determines whether anything you're doing is threatening or not. And then finally, you have the human brain, the neocortex, and this is the area where that kind of executive functioning, right, your prefrontal cortex, that part of you that can rationalize and say, I'm going to make this behavior because of my logic and reason. The problem is that all sensory input goes through those lower portions of the brain first. And so even what you perceive directly has already been colored by what your amygdala thinks, how you feel. And your upper brain only really has limited veto ability to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And when that wears out, when it gets tired, that's it. That's why you're more likely to do impulsive things at the end of the day, right? So with your, um, so what happens in this case then? Like imagine that you are trying to assess whether to believe something, a claim that someone has made. Your initial information is going to come out with, oh, am I, how do I feel about this? Does this feel like a threat? And then usually what happens is the higher brain actually rationalizes why you should do the thing that you feel like doing. So the elephant leans in a certain direction, and then the rider rationalizes why you should go in that direction. It's usually bottom up, not top down. And so you could see how somebody might, you might hear about, like a religious person might hear about a skeptical claim and be like, oh, their elephant says, I don't feel good about this. This feels threatening. So I don't want to do it. And then they just rationalize, right? They do apologetics. Um, so this is something to really keep in mind, is at the end of the day, the goal of our brains is not accuracy. It is survival. And this leads to things like mentalization, for example, that our brain is going to err on the side of attributing agency to things, right? Because if you were out in the jungle and there's a rustling in the bushes, is it safer to assume that it's just the wind, or is it safer to assume that it's some eldritch horror trying to eat you and you should run away? At the end of the day, it's going to be more likely that you're uh, going to survive if you assume the worst. This kind of mentalization ability, they think, is one of the big roots of religion, where you start seeing, nature and even the cosmos itself as having some sort of mind agency that it and desires and motivations. So religious belief then would have led to survival advantage, right? Through individual selection, natural selection. There's not necessarily like a God gene per se. Religiousness probably kind of, as I said, grew out as like a byproduct of things like mentalizing and us developing more social behavior with tribes. And of course, the tendency to believe in your tribe's God and really adhere to the taboos and the rituals and all the things required by your tribe would probably lead you to have more access to resources and would lead to you to have a better ability to reproduce. So, direct natural selection there for religiosity. Group selection probably also took place. Tribes that worked together really well cohesively would outlive other tribes. And religion is one of the things that would really help those tribes work together. So belief in religion would be evolutionarily selected for as a trait that conferred fitness. And so the question then becomes, if we have such strong inbuilt tendencies towards religion and towards superstition, the paranormal, then why are some people skeptics, right? Why do we have people that don't believe? There's several possible reasons for this. One is that we are following our tribe still, and we just happen to be in tribes that value scientific rigor and accuracy, right? Our elephant leans in a different direction than the elephant of the religious people. So we're more likely to take cues from our parents and caregivers growing up, which tells us, do we believe? Um, and we are more likely to believe authority figures that are from our chosen tribe. And this happens for both skeptics and believers. Believers would be more likely to believe, of course, a religious figure, a statement made by a religious figure. Skeptics would be more likely to believe someone who's like an expert with a credential and without necessarily questioning it all of the time. If you think about it, there's probably times that you just kind of straight believe something because an expert said it. Um, One thing I should mention is that what your tribe is not necessarily who you're born with. We may sometimes choose a different tribe. And so basically it comes down to whose opinion do you care about and who are you trying to fit in with and connect with and and receive survival support from. Another big reason would be that believers and skeptics do differ in several meaningful ways. So, looking at what research has been done, one of the biggest findings that comes out is the difference in thinking style. So there's intuitive thinking, which is a fast, automatic, and effortless form of thinking. And there's an analytical form of thinking that is very slow, deliberate, and effortful, where you're trying to reason things out. We do use these different ones at different times. Intuitive is more likely to be used in social situations because you need to make quick judgments and there's not necessarily a right answer. Analytical thinking ideally would be used when trying to solve problems. But people do favor one over the other. And it's been pretty clearly shown that believers tend to favor intuitive thinking and skeptics tend to favor analytical thinking. One good example of this is a lot of cognitive studies that they've done where they're assessing people's ability to reason about chance. So if you look at this, if you give somebody a sequence of coin flips, right? People vary in whether they view these things to be random. Statistically, it can totally be random, even if you get like a full string of heads or a full string of tails. It's maybe less likely, but it's not random. It is random. It can be random. You can totally get that as a random set of coin flips. But believers are much less likely to believe that. They do not see things as being happening by chance as often as skeptics can view things as happening by chance. And when they give the skeptics and the believers this task, the believers will generally respond more quickly and with more or with less doubt, right? With less self questioning about it. Whereas, skeptics might ponder a little bit and question themselves, second guess themselves. So you can see those two kinds of thinking styles at work in this task. There are also potential genetic differences. The twin studies where they compare pairs of twins that they theoretically have exactly the same genes, but they have different environments, or vice versa. They have the same environment but different genes for fraternal rather than identical twins. And they found religiosity to be anywhere from 35 to 55% heritable. This varies depending on how they define religiosity. Um, Again, this is not a God gene, but probably a combination of genes related to these tendencies to mentalize and prosocial behavior. When they look at personality traits, which the big five personality traits are commonly viewed as at least somewhat heritable. The religiosity has been found to be associated with very socially oriented traits like being extroverted, being agreeable, and being conscientious about how you treat other people. And they also found that it can be slightly more heritable for women than men. Some other differences, yes, with regard to religion, they did find that skeptics tend to have a higher general intelligence than believers. Um, there's Skeptics tend to be higher in openness to ideas, which is a personality trait, a facet of the larger personality trait, openness to experience. So they're more comfortable with new ideas and tend to seek them out more. And when you look at the context, these differences can be stronger in a society that is more religious overall. So you see that when there's a lot of societal pressure to be religious, then only the people with these traits really will break out as skeptics, versus in a society that's less overtly religious, some people who do not have these traits may also kind of peel off and become skeptics. So, given that we see these differences between skeptics and believers, and that there is still this evolutionary imperative to believe in things, um, is it better to be a skeptic or a believer, right? What are the benefits? The benefits of being a skeptic, I think, are pretty obvious. In a lot of cases, you're being more reality based. Yes, I am a skeptic, so I'm going to be talking from that standpoint. Um, that assumption that you're going to be more reality based and you're going to have less situations where reality smacks you in the face, right? Um, but are there benefits to being a believer? Well, the research has shown um, and also some of this is, theoretical or logical. Um, Beliefs in both supernatural and paranormal things can be what they call real but not true. So, for example, walking under a ladder is like probably objectively a bad idea, right? The something may fall on you. But if you have some belief that it's bad luck, then that may still have a good outcome because it's getting you to not walk under the ladder. Self-fulfilling prophecy is also a good example of this. The law belief in the law of attraction may actually work, even though you're wrong about what the cause is, right? You believe that it's mystical, but it's actually just behavioral. And then, of course, with religion, believing in a God and avoiding angering that God is what's keeping you from angering your tribe, which is kind of literally the reason we think that it evolved. So the belief, even though the reason for doing the things may be incorrect, the outcomes will still be helpful. There's also some differences in subjective well-being. Participation in religion or spirituality can improve psychological well-being. It can provide social support, feelings of meaning in life, etc. This is not specific to any one religious tradition, and it generally seems to hinge on, do you feel a connection to something greater? Um, and then for experiences of the paranormal variety, especially so feeling like you have a psychic ability or knowing someone who you believe has a psychic ability, can give feelings of meaning and purpose to the person having those experiences and may help satisfy a need for control, right? They feel like they have a little bit more control over the world because either they can directly make things happen or they can know about things or predict things. So subjectively, this can actually feel like greater well-being to the people holding these beliefs. Another big thing is managing the fear of death. There's a whole theory, terror management theory, that basically posits that people use belief in religion and also other ideologies like political ideologies to manage their anxiety about death, feeling like they are investing in a cause bigger than themselves, like furthering the aims of the church or furthering their political party, can help them feel like they have some form of immortality, or even just believing in an afterlife can make them feel like they have some form of immortality. So, in terror management theory studies, when people are reminded of death, they show on surveys higher levels of religious beliefs. And the reminder can be just as subtle as the place that they go to take their survey is next door to a graveyard. So it can be a very subtle thing that might happen to people on a daily basis, that when they're reminded of their mortality, they lean into religious belief. And finally, I'm just to bring this all together. There's a major theory of human needs, human motivation, that says we have three basic overarching needs, and that would be belongingness, so feeling like belonging to a tribe; competence, the feeling that you can affect the world around you and make things happen; and autonomy, feeling like you have the freedom to live your life as you choose. And we can see pretty clearly that belief in religion would help fulfill belongingness, and paranormal beliefs might help fulfill competence, like the ability to make things happen or the ability to know that things are going to happen in the future. So it would make sense that some people may kind of cling to these beliefs in order to fulfill basic human needs. So Bringing this all together, just a summary, a review of what we've said. Religion and paranormal experiences are somewhat baked into our evolution and may have conferred survival benefits throughout human evolution. It is, as I said, a feature, not a bug. Those who are in a more skeptical tribe or who have certain traits and thinking styles are more likely to question their experiences and question their peers and become skeptics. And then many beliefs still incur some benefits by being real, if not true, and by fulfilling human needs. So, what would be the implications here for skeptics and three free thinkers, since this is my audience? If you're trying to, change minds and help reduce levels of superstition in others, what do you do? Well, the first thing is you need to understand that these believers aren't just misinformed or ignorant or even malicious. They're using this. This is part of what helps them survive and have well-being, and it's more important to them than just knowledge. So trying to change their mind by just giving them information and kind of talking down like they're, ignorant or dumb may just come off as arrogant and just really upset them. And then you're not going to get anywhere with them. Like I like to say, if you see someone, who's injured and has a cane, you don't go and kick the cane out from under them. You help them slowly to learn to walk without the cane. So efforts to dispel myths may need to include other ways for people to meet the needs that are met by these beliefs, such as providing community, providing safety, helping them have a sense of control, helping them have comfort around death, helping them to have meaning in their life, and showing them that they can have these things without their religious beliefs or paranormal beliefs. So that is what I have. That is my talk. So thank you for listening.